Welcome to Microsoft 365 Excel, the complete story. And in this video, we got to talk about visualizing data and dashboard fundamentals in Excel and Power BI. Now, here are all the topics for this video. And the first part of this video, we're going to go over the basics and fundamentals of visualizing effectively. Then we're going to jump in and do an Excel worksheet dashboard, a Power BI desktop, and online dashboard. And all three will be based on the same data set. Then we're going to cover almost the most important part of dashboarding, importing, cleaning, and transforming data. We'll have a great Power Query example. And then from that Power Query output, I'll show you some important points about building array formula dashboards, PivotTable dashboards, and Power BI desktop dashboards. All right, let's get started with the fundamentals of visualizations with some examples of what not to do. Even though in the working world it's common to see a table of data like this, this is what we really want. For charts, even though Microsoft offers lots of chart junk options, we're always going to go simple and effective with our charts. If we need to visualize our table data with a heat map, conditional formatting comes to the rescue. And of course, when we build our dashboard, we'll use visualizations when we want a quick impression and tables of data when we want to compare precise numbers. The definition of data analysis and business intelligence: convert raw data into useful information for decision makers. But guess what? Data analysis yields numbers and visualizations. This is information presented in a table. This is information presented visually. Both are the end result of data analysis. Why tables? Because we want details of the numbers. Tables of numbers help make precise comparisons. We can precisely compare Majestic, Butte, and Quad because we have the exact numbers. Why visualize? A quick visual impression. A picture tells 1,000 words, and we can make relative comparisons quickly. We may not know the exact numbers for Quad and Majestic Butte, but we can clearly see that Quad is much bigger. With visualizations, we can instantly see Quad is the biggest and Carlota is the second biggest. Here's a table with all the detail, but it's hard to see the pattern or trend. Here's the perfect visualization for pattern and trends over time, the line chart. We can clearly see up, up, and we even have a little legend that reminds us the two high points correspond to these two promotion efforts. Here's a table across tabs showing month and sales channel. We get all the detail here, but down here we have two perfect charts in Excel that articulate a crosstab. Here we can clearly compare sales channel within each month. Over here we can compare the months, and then within the months compare the sales channel. Sometimes we mix our tables, numbers and visualizations. We definitely want a table with all the detail, but look at this. We visualize top three using conditional formatting. Over here, we still get the immediate impact of our visualization, but we also have some of the detail. Now, rules for effective visualization. Eliminate extraneous elements in your visualization that do not help to deliver your message. Now, there's a guy named Edward Tufte. He's a world-renowned visualization expert, and he created the golden rule for effective visualization. There's actually two parts. The first part is data ink ratio should be high. Here we have lots of data and less ink. Over here we have the same amount of data, but lots of ink. That lots of ink gets in the way of delivering an effective message. Too many lines. The different colors probably don't help the message, and this is messy. We need to have the same number of digits for all the numbers in our table. All right, so data ink ratio should be high. The second rule is no chart junk. That is junk. This is simple and to the point. Yes, Microsoft has always offered these 3D, but what does it do? It distorts the proportions. We don't need all this crazy color. We don't need warm colors pushing this out and cool colors pushing it back. We don't need all this clutter. And look at this, unnecessary repetition. If we have the names here, I don't want them also in a second location. Over here, we get a quick visual impression with the names of the products. And over here, if we want to estimate what the number is, we have our numbers in thousands. Now here's a chart I just saw this morning online at a news website. The heights of the column represent job approval rating. And I kind of like that. Since the article is about the current percentage, they put just one data point at the top. Well, look at this down here. This is kind of inconsistent. Sometimes we have the whole month. Sometimes we have a 3-letter or 4-letter abbreviation. We probably want to be consistent. Also, since they're diagonal, it adds a certain busyness. We might convert these to 3 letters and align them vertically. Now we're going to start on the sheet T, and we want to talk about table design principles. We mentioned data ink ratio should be high. Horizontal lines are generally necessary only for separating column titles from data values. We can see that rule in action. Sometimes we use lines when we indicate that a calculation has taken place, like at the bottom for our column total. In large tables, light shading can be used to differentiate columns. For example, here's a finished solution for one of your homework problems. Numbers should be aligned right. Text left. All numbers should have the same number of digits. You could see up here we violated that rule. Something so amazingly common in the business world. It always amazes me. People love to center everything. We don't want to do that. Text to the left, numbers to the right. And we definitely don't want all the messy decimals. We want to keep it neat. Units must be indicated either with number formatting or labels. Here we didn't want to clutter it up with all the dollar signs, so we indicate up at the top. And then large numbers may be rounded to the thousands, millions, or billions. We can see over here these numbers have been rounded to the millions, and it's indicated at the top of the column. Now on the sheet T, let's scroll down. And we want to learn a few cool tricks for formatting. The first thing is we need to remove all the formatting. Home. Editing group, there's this awesome eraser button, Clear. Clear All would remove all the content, like delete, and the formatting. What we want is the second one, Clear Formats. Now this is such a common command, it's worth learning the keyboards. Now this keyboard is from earlier versions of Excel before the ribbon, and this is the one after. It is 4 different clicks in succession, so you can pick the one you want. Alt-EAF. So that's how quick it is when you know the keyboard. Now we want to add some light fill, and I'm going to highlight a row above and a column to the side and below. Home Ribbon tab, right-click, uncollapse. From the paint bucket, I'll select a light color. Now let's try some number formatting to get the same number of decimals. We could use drop-down. We could use the dialog launcher, or we can use the keyboard, Control-1, to open up format cells. I'd like number, comma, 0 decimals. Click OK. Already looking much neater. Now, what are we going to do about these? Well, we can indicate the percentage at the top, but then I need to convert the underlying number. Instead of a decimal, I need it 6.41. Here's a great trick. You can type the number 100 into a cell, Control-C to copy that cell, highlight the numbers, right-click, and here it is, Paste Special. This dialog box will allow us to do an operation with that copied number on the selected numbers. So I'm going to say, hey, multiply. Now, if I click OK, it'll multiply, but it will remove the formatting. So I'm going to say, please, values only. Those two together, when I click OK, convert the underlying number to a different number. Now, I would never do this trick if I was ever going to use those in calculations, because I fundamentally changed the number. But as a final report, that is a great trick. Now we need bottom border, so I'm going to highlight the column headers. Up here, first one, bottom border. Now the column width, I'm going to try and select all the columns from C all the way to H. And by changing one, I will change them all. I'm making sure that I didn't cut anything off. Maybe I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Just boop. Now we have our finished table. Now we may want it on this sheet. We may want to put it into a Word document or a PowerPoint. And I got to show you a great trick. I'm going to highlight Control C. Now I opened up a Word document, but the same trick will work in PowerPoint. Up to the clipboard, paste. And there it is, Paste Special. Now this is the Paste Special dialog box. There was a button up there for picture. Here's the picture right here. But if you want it linked, that means if you select that, if you change it over in Excel, it will update here. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to paste it as a picture. Click OK. Now I'm going to click Escape to turn the dancing ants off. Oftentimes we want to print reports like this. That's where Page Setup comes in. Now we can go to Page Layout, Page Setup, and Dialog Launcher, or you can use the keyboard, Alt-PSP. This is definitely wider than it is tall, so I'm doing Landscape. I don't know exactly how big it's going to be. I may have to come back and change this later. Margins. You can adjust them here. I generally just say horizontal. Header or footer. There's some great options for printing. I'm going to go not to the drop-down, but that's a great one there if you have lots of pages. Page 1 of question mark. I want to go to Custom Footer. And these icons here and the screen tips that pop up offer up a bunch of good footer options. In the center, I'm going to say Date, Space, Dash, Space. And look at that. I want the Sheet tab name. Click OK. Now, Sheet, we want the print area to be forced only to this range. And now we want to click OK. Now, if we Control P, look at that. I can see page 1 of 2. I need to reduce the size. We can go to the Page Setup dialog box from Page Preview. I'm going to say Fit to 1 page wide by 1 page tall. Click OK. And there we go. Table formatting rules, including pasting as a picture and page setup. Now let's go over to our next sheet, CF. Now we already saw last video how to create this amazing cross-tab pivot table report with just a few clicks. But now we want to add some visualization to show the top 5 numbers in green. Now this is a pivot table, so we can either highlight exactly the numbers we want, or we can select a single cell because it's a pivot table object. And conditional formatting is Home Ribbon tab, Style Group, and there it is, conditional formatting, the drop down. And there are a bunch of built-in features that are just amazing. The one we want is top bottom rules, and we want top 10 items. Now that's the default formatting. We'll fix that. Down, 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 because we only want 5. Click the drop down, and here's the one where you have all the options. Click. This is the Format Cells dialog box. Anything we do in this dialog box will be applied, but only when it's true that the number in the table is in the top 5. I'm going to do Fill Green. That's pretty dark, so now I'm going to go over to Font. Font color white, and I'm going to add bold. Click OK. Now when I click OK, what happened? Well, this is different than formatting just in the cells. This is a pivot table. So this Smart tag will pop up. Hover your cursor, click the drop-down arrow, and look at this. There's our AND logical test that we learned last video. This is summing the sales for the column month and the sales channel column. So when I click that, instantly I get my conditional formatting. Now we'll add some data to this data set in just a second. I'm going to collapse this. For our second conditional formatting example, we want to create a heat map. That means it's going to, when I click the button, add some formatting. The top third, biggest numbers will be blue. The numbers that are in the middle will be white, and the smallest numbers will be red. Click in a single cell, conditional formatting, color scales. I'm going to select this one right here. Hover my cursor, click. And I'll use the AND logical test. That means internally inside the pivot table, not the totals around the outside. And that is a beautiful way to visualize. Clearly, we can see website sales and in-store sales have the 2 biggest ones because they're blue, and poor email coupons. They're stuck with most of the red. Now, there is some hidden data between G and N, so I'm going to click the grouping button very carefully. I'm going to select one cell, and notice there's an empty cell because I do not want to copy the field names. But click in one cell, and we're going to use Control asterisk. That's either asterisk on the number pad or Control Shift 8. That will always select the current table or the current range. Control C. Very carefully, I'm going to click in the date column. Control down arrow to jump down to the last date in the last record. Click directly below. And now when I Control V, the new records are incorporated into the table object. Control up arrow. And now I'm going to uncollapse. Scroll over. All right, we have our cross tab with conditional formatting for top 5, conditional formatting for heat map. Now we can refresh. Right click to refresh the cache. And bam, just like that, we have our updated months and the conditional formatting has updated. All right, so conditional formatting top 5, heat map when we have tables of data. Now let's go to our next sheet, CBP, for column, bar, and pie. Now on this sheet, we already have a pivot table with product and amounts, and we want to compare these amounts across product. The perfect chart for that is the column or bar chart. Insert. And over in the chart group, we have a bunch of choices. We're going to point to the drop down for Insert Column. This is chart junk. We're going to either use the column or the bar. Now we have a choice between clustered and stacked. That only comes into play when you have more than one variable, like in our cross tab, which we'll do later in the video. So we're going to select the first one, clustered column. I click, we can point to the edge, and when we see our move cursor, we can click and drag. Now, anytime you have a visualization, you want to look at every element and ask, does it help deliver a message? Well, our goal is to compare the differences across the products. Well, the columns certainly help. The names certainly help. What about this right here? This is called a legend. This will help us when we have more than one series of numbers, but for us, we don't need it. So when I select it, I can use the delete key. These are called field buttons, and although you can use them to filter, most of the time we will have done our filtering inside the pivot table. And they're interchangeable. If I use it here or over here, it will filter both pivot table and pivot chart. Now I want to not display those field buttons. So up in the Pivot Chart Tools Analyze, I see field buttons. I'm going to say Hide All. The next chart element we want to look at are the horizontal grid lines. Most of the time we don't need them. It's just extra ink that doesn't help deliver the message. If it's important to be able to line up exactly whatever number we have over here in the vertical axis and the column, then we can keep them. I'm going to use the delete key. Well, that's looking better already. But we keep going through all the elements. Do we need a chart title? Well, certainly not with the word total. That doesn't help at all. Now, I do want a chart title, and I want it to say Win Sport Product Summer Sales with that $sign. Now, watch this. This is a great trick. Whereas these labels and the numbers are actually linked. So if something changes over here, it'll automatically update. This chart title will not. No problem. With the chart title selected and a solid line, I didn't click inside with a dotted line. I want to make sure it's solid. Then I can come up to the formula bar, type in $, and that text is sitting in cell A1. So I select A1, and look at that. I'm linking a label in a chart to a formula. When I hit Enter, there's my chart title. Of course, if I change this, it totally updates. Control Z. Do we need these numbers in the vertical axis? Yeah, we need them. Do we need these words here? Definitely. That's the whole point to this chart. Now, both column, bar, and pie, they all do the same thing. We use these charts or visualizations to compare differences across categories. Quickly, I can see that Quad is the biggest. Looks like Carlota is the second biggest. Research shows that the column and bar conveys differences across categories more effectively than the pie. And in fact, throughout history, the pie was used a lot. But in the last 5 to 10 years, the pie is out. Here's an example. Same exact data, but it's just too hard to tell the differences between the pie pieces. Much easier to tell the differences from column heights. Remember, the meaning of this is to compare differences quickly with a visual impression across our categories. Now, these are diagonal, and we talked about that chart we saw online where that makes it kind of busy. But I think we can still do better. Now, I want to copy the edge of this. Be sure with charts, sometimes it's hard if you're clicking around. If I copy and paste, it might not work. I want to click on the outside edge. So I see those round circles and nothing else selected. Control C, I come over to the side, and Control V. Now I want to change the chart type. Pivot Chart Tools, Design. There's the button to change the chart type. Or we can come to the chart, right click, and there it is. I want to change the chart type. Over here we can see column, I want bar, and there we go. Click OK. Both charts do the same thing. We're comparing differences across categories. But the bar chart can do two things differently than the column chart. The first thing is it accommodates longer labels, listing them horizontally rather than diagonally. The second thing that a bar chart will do is it emphasizes the differences between the categories more forcefully than a column chart. And that makes sense because when we tilt this on its side, it's longer than it is taller. Now I'd like to change the gap width between the columns and make it smaller. Now I select the columns, and I'm going to use a keyboard. And guess what? If I'm in the cells and use the keyboard Control-1, it opens up Format Cells. If I'm in a chart and I have a certain chart element selected, when I use Control-1, it opens up the task pane. Now if I have different elements selected, this task pane will show different options for formatting that chart element. Now one thing that's kind of tricky about the formatting task pane for charts is that sometimes it's hard to find things. These icons at the top, you can click and then look for what you want. You can use the triangles to open up and see other options. Now I'm going to click on the series option, and what we want is gap width. I'm going to highlight and change this to 70, 70 and tab. Now one thing you want to be careful is the only times you would have 0 gap width is when you have an upper and lower limit, like you're counting between 0 and 50, 50 and 100. Anytime you have categorical or qualitative variables like this, you do not want 0 gap width. But there we go. That is looking pretty good. Now I'd like to show you two options where we actually add numbers. Let's copy this chart, Control-C, and then below it I'm going to Control-V. Same thing over here. Select, Control-C, click in a cell below, Control-V. Now we'll scroll down. Now I'd like to add some numbers to the top of each column. Now we can add some elements and change some aspects of our chart using the task pane. But this green plus in the upper right of each chart allows us to add and remove chart elements. And I want to go down to data labels and simply check. And just like that, I have the numbers at the top of each column. Now there's a problem here because if I have numbers here and here, that's unnecessary repetition. So if you want them at the top, then we'll select the axis and delete. Now let's click on our bar. Let's close the task pane. There's that green plus. And this time, click that arrow and say inside N. Well, wait a second. The value difference between the font color and the fill color is not big enough. So I'm going to click once on the data labels. Up in the Home Ribbon tab, we'll use Font Color White. Now I click off to the side, and it looks pretty good, except for that one. Well, if I click on the data labels, it selects them all. If I click a second time, it selects just that one. And so now I can add a different formatting. I'll add black font. I can also use my move cursor to click and drag. Click off to the side. That's looking pretty good, except for our chart junk. So I click on the horizontal axis and delete. We can also resize the chart if we'd like. Column and bar. The perfect chart when you want to compare differences across categories, not the pie. Now on the next sheet, CT Charts, we want to talk about a cross-tab chart. I'm going to click inside our cross-tab pivot table, Insert, over to Charts. And guess what? We use the same either clustered column or stacked column. We're going to start with a clustered column. And look at that. It displays two different columns with a unique list. Here's the month. Here's the sales channel. The clustered column puts the emphasis on the items in the legend because we're allowed for each month to compare each one of the items from the legend. 1, 2, 3 for June, 1, 2, 3 for July. Clearly, we can see website sales the biggest. For August, it was in-store sales. Now let's tighten up this chart. I want to remove the field button. So I come up, Pivot Table Tools, Analyze, Field Buttons, Hide All. I don't think I want the grid line, so I click and delete. Now let's click on the legend, Control-1 to open up the task pane. And because we had that particular element selected, the pane popped up with the options we want. Now again, that doesn't always work, so sometimes you really have to hunt around. But there it is. I want to select top. Now I want to go to my green plus, and I want to add a chart title. With the solid line, I come up to the formula bar, or I can simply hit the F2 key. That shoots my cursor up to the formula bar. I type an equal sign, click on the cell with my title. There it is. I hit Enter. Now let's scroll over a bit, and we want to compare and contrast this clustered column. Control-C, click in a cell, Control-V, right-click, change chart type. And we want to compare it to stacked column. Click, click OK. And now we have the same exact data, the same two variables. There's our month. There's our legend. But now the emphasis isn't on the items in the legend. It's the items in the horizontal axis. Clearly, we can see amongst all of the months, June is the biggest, August is the second biggest. But we still have the ability with our second variable to compare within each month each of the sales channels. Stack column, the emphasis is on the horizontal axis variable. Clustered column, the emphasis is on the item in the legend. Now if I copy, Control-C, click below, Control-V, right-click. Change chart type. We want to come over to bar. Click OK. These two articulate a similar message. However, the bar will emphasize the differences between the categories more forcefully than the column chart. Click, Control-C, down below, Control-V. Right-click, change chart type, bar. Click OK. So either column or bar, clustered or stacked column. These are the perfect charts when we have a crosstab and we want to visualize that report. All right, now we want to go over to the next sheet, line first. Now we're going to start off on this sheet and look at a couple simple examples. Then we'll look at a really cool line chart. Now line charts have one number on a vertical axis. For example, company sales. The line will go up and down, showing us the pattern or trend, and the category will be on the horizontal axis. In our case, quarter. So if I click in a single cell, insert, charts, not the scatter, we want the line. I'm going to use this one right here. Click on grid lines, delete. Click on the axis, Control-1. I want to start this at 500,000, so I come over to minimum. Highlight, type 500,000, and tab. That's just a simple example of a line chart showing the number variable going up and down across a category. We can have two numbers, but they will be two different series being plotted across this category. So I click in a single cell, insert, drop down for line, click on chart title, delete, horizontal lines, delete. And we can see with this example that we're definitely allowed from the legend to have two series numbers plotted against the same horizontal category. One last thing about line charts. Wow, this is a common chart. We want year on the horizontal and company sales as the line. So we click in a single cell, insert, charts, there's the line. And what? The chart totally interpreted this as a number that it should plot as a line. And that's not what we want. Now I'm going to delete the chart title and the horizontal lines. And here's the number one trick for charts. The charts will not always guess right or interpret what you want. Also, sometimes we may want to add new series of numbers to our chart. So the trick is up in Chart Tools, Design, there it is, Select Data. Or I simply right-click, Select Data. This Select Data is the real power. We can add new series of numbers. We can edit. We can remove. In our case, I want to select year and remove. Here we want to edit and add the correct years. So I highlight the numbers, click OK. Select data source. This is the real power. If you have trouble, come here, add, edit, remove, or edit the horizontal axis. Click OK. All right, now let's go over to the sheet line. Now we want to build that line chart we saw at the beginning of the video. Here's our data set. We went ahead and created a pivot table adding week down to rows, revenue down to values. There it is, week, sum of revenue. Now we want to add a line chart. So I click in a single cell, insert. There's our line. That's looking pretty good. I want to click on the title. And this time, instead of linking it to a cell, I'm just going to start typing. And as soon as I start typing, it shoots me up to the formula bar. Then when I hit Enter, now I've typed a title in. I want to remove these field buttons, hide all. Now we'll delete the grid lines. That legend, we'll deal with that later. Currently, as it sits, it's chart junk. Down here, what are these numbers? Anytime you have a chart and there's some numbers in the axis, it better be obvious what this number means. Up here we have sales, so we can imply that these are the sales. But down here, we definitely need to come up to our green plus, axis titles, click primary horizontal. Now I see the solid line. I type an equal sign. That shoots me up to the formula bar. I'm going to select week inside the pivot table. And when I hit Enter, now I have the variable that informs the viewer of what these numbers mean. Now that line chart is pretty good. It shows us for these weeks and these weeks, wow, sales were high. Now what I would like is I would like to inform the viewer of why we think these sales are high. I can see these numbers in the pivot table, and actually they correspond perfectly to some promotions we did. And our data set has for a particular sale whether it was part of a promotion. Now I want to highlight the D column all the way to G. You can see there's some hidden columns, so right-click, unhide. Now this column here represents all the numbers. That's how the line chart got drawn. But I only want numbers for those particular promotions for only a certain number of weeks. Now the way we do this in charts is I need a column, a separate column that I can add to this chart. I need this column just for Festival of Flight, right here and here and here, to show these numbers. But the rest of them, I don't want them to show up in the chart. Now the way charts look at columns is if they see a number, they plot it. But if we have a not available, and in Excel there's a not available function, that's the trigger to tell the chart that that particular line or item shouldn't be included. Now actually what we're going to do is we're going to summarize and add these to the pivot table. But the same thing will happen over here. NAs will not be plotted by the chart. So you ready? We're going to put one of two things into the column. Either for this record the actual number, or when it's not the promotion, NA. And the way we put one of two things into a formula is with the if function. So I'm going to create a logical test. If, as a relative cell reference, that promotion item is equal to Festival of Flight, and I need to lock this with the F4 key. If that's true, then please put the number in this column as a relative cell reference. Otherwise, for the value if false, we put NA, close parentheses. That formula will work. Control-Enter, double-click, and send it down. And we have just what we want. The pivot table and the line chart will interpret NAs and the numbers for the promotion correctly. Now we have to do this also for the fall kite event. So we look at the promotion column. Are you equal to fall kite event? F4, comma, if that's true, I want the number, comma, otherwise, please show NA. Control-Enter, double-click, and send it down. Now we're going to move this over to the side because the pivot table, when we click inside, we want to add these two columns. Festival of Flight, I drag it down to values. And just like that, well, wait a second, count, right? When it saw that NA, it actually didn't work. But no problem, right-click. We can change the summary calculation to sum. And there we go. That is beautiful. All the NAs. Oh, we already see a preview over here. These are all the NAs. But just between the 4 weeks when we ran that promotion, those 4 numbers show up in our chart. Not only that, but look at that. We have an informative legend that says that's part of the promotion. Fall kite event, down to values. Right-click, summarize values by sum. Now I'm going to hide these 2 columns. Click M and N, right-click, hide. I can move the chart, extend the edge, Click on the legend, Control 1, top. Let's click on the line. I want this to be bright red. Over in Format Data Series, there's the paint bucket. There's the line. We'll change it to red. Let's select Fall Kite Event. We'll make this blue. And I'll select the full line for revenue, and we'll change this to green. Now I'd like to change the labels here, so I'm going to highlight L and O, right-click, unhide. Click in the Pivot Table column header, and I want to remove some of, delete. Same over here, delete. Select, hide. And now our chart is looking awesome. We have the pattern or trend for our revenue and an indicator for our 2 promotions. All right, our last visualization is the XY scatter chart. Now on the sheet XY, we have an X and Y variable. We want to look at 2 variables and see if there's a relationship. Now there's lots of mathematical and statistical techniques, but all we want to look at is the visual technique. We click in a single cell, Insert, Charts, and there's the drop-down for XY. Now our example, we've collected data, so we use the marker version. But if you have a model like a fixed cost, variable cost model, then you use the one with the lines. We're going to use scatter. Now the first problem is we do not have our variable labels. Green plus, axis titles. This is the Y, equal sign. Click on test score and enter. Click equal sign. There's the X and enter. Click on vertical, delete. Click on horizontal, delete. Click on the title, equal sign. Click on F1 and enter. And now we can see very quickly we have a visualization that asks the question, is there a relationship between hours studied and test score? Well, it does look like as we increase the number of hours studied, it does look like the test score goes up. All right, so that's a bunch about different chart types, when to use them, and how to use them. Now we want to put these visualization tips to work and build our first dashboard in Excel. Let's go over to the sheet CS Data. Chantel Washington is a manager, and she's tracking customer service encounters. And here's the data set she's keeping. Each one of these rows is a record for her customer encounter. Some of the columns we're interested in for a dashboard: day of the week, time, the topic of the meeting type, and the duration of the meeting. If we go over here, these are the goals that Chantel has for this dashboard. Chantel Washington is a manager who works at a large hardware and lumber store with many customer accounts. However, customer service is not part of her main duty. She wants to document the excess customer service duties she is performing. And she wants to do this by building a dashboard with a number of tables and charts. She wants a quick visual impression of the frequency of customer contact by hour and by day. And she wants the specific counts for topics of meeting, counts of meeting type as a percentage, and the average meeting duration. Chantel also wants to have the dashboard update easily when she adds new records, and she wants to be able to print out this dashboard about once a week. All right, we're going to go to the data sheet. We're going to build some pivot tables and charts here, and then depending on whether we want both a pivot or chart, we'll move them or copy them and place them over here in the dashboard. So we'll start over in our customer service table. I'm going to click in a single cell, and I guess we'll build the frequency by day of week first. Insert Pivot Table, or as we learned last video, the keyboard is Alt and V. We want it on an existing sheet, location. Bill DB. Location will be cell A4. Click OK. Day of week down to rows. Now we could drag day of week to count, but I want it to say count of customer, so I'm going to drag customer. Remember, any field drag down that's text will just count how many times the particular row label criteria occurred in the data set. So we can see that Wednesday was 27, Sunday 1, Saturday 2. Now we're not going to use this table of data in the dashboard. We're going to make a chart. But for all 4 of the pivot tables we're going to create, I want to show you how to add a custom style up in Design for our pivot tables. A couple of these pivot tables will be used in the dashboard, and I want the pivot table to follow our table formatting guidelines. So up in Pivot Table Tools Design, click the More button, and down here, New Pivot Table Style. We're definitely going to name this. I called it Pivot Table Following Table Rules. Now, for each one of the elements in our pivot table, you can click the Format button and add formatting. Now, there's a lot of elements here, but we're going to keep it simple. So whole table, Format. Over to Fill. I'm going to select white because I don't ever want to see these gray lines. Click OK. So we have one element where we've used Format. Now we'll go down to the header row. That's this row right here. Format. We'll use a light blue. And I want to follow our table rules where the headers have a border at the bottom. Click. Also under Font, let's add bold. Click OK. We can scroll down. Grand total. Format. For the totals, we want a border, a thin line at the top. That's going to say there's some calculation on the numbers above. Double line, that's at the bottom to indicate that this is the final number. Over to Font, bold. Click OK. Now you can play around with the rest of these, but these simple bits of formatting will follow our table rule. Click OK. It doesn't apply it immediately. We have to come back up to More. And there, if we hover, we can see our style. Now, guess what? Right-click. You can modify this anytime, and all the pivot tables in the Excel workbook will update. And what I want to do is I want to set this as the default pivot table style. So anytime we create a new pivot table, this style will be used. Click OK. Now I want to go back over to the data set, and we're going to use our keyboard Alt-N-V, and I want to put it on that same sheet. Build dashboard, and this one's going to be in cell D4. Click OK. Rounded time down to rows. We get a unique list of our hours. Same thing, I'm going to drag customer because I want it to say count of customer. And look at that. The default style we created is now applied to any new pivot table. Back over to our data set. Alt-N-V, existing, click location, build dashboard. Scroll over. I'm going to put this in G4. Click OK. We want a count of topic meeting. So I'm going to drag it down to rows. There's our unique list. Topic of meeting down to values. There's our count. Now I want to sort this. So right-click, sort. I want to see the biggest on top, Z to A. New account is the number 1 topic. Legal issue number 15. Compromise account issue, and so on. That will be one of the tables we actually use in our final dashboard. Back over to CS Data, Alt-N-V, existing, location, build DB. Let's say J4. Click OK. Now here, this is the one where we want some calculations based on the meeting type. So we get a unique list, either email, meeting, office, phone. I'm going to drag meeting type down to values. It defaults to count. We could leave it like that, but she said she wanted %. Right-click. Show values as % of column total. 43% in the office, 38% by email, 18% by phone. Now we're going to drag duration down to values. Right-click, and we want average. So the aggregate calculation will be average. Right-click, number formatting. Something like number, 2 decimals, click OK. Now I want to add some wrap text, so I'm going to select those cells. Home ribbon tab, wrap text. Select K and L. Click and drag to make them the same width. I'm going to do the same over here, wrap text. And now change the column width. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 pivot tables. These two have detailed numbers that we want in our dashboard, but these two frequency distribution counting customer encounters by day and hour, we want to visualize these. So the perfect chart to visualize differences across categories is either column or bar. All right, this is a pivot table. I'm going to click in a single cell, Insert, over to Charts. Click the drop down for column, and there it is. I'm going to choose a bar. Horizontal bars tend to emphasize the differences between the categories better. All right, I want to remove those field buttons. Field buttons, hide all. We only have one series of numbers, so this is chart junk. I'm going to select and delete. Select the grid lines, delete. Let's select the title. Equal sign shoots me up to the formula bar. Select cell A1 and enter. Let's resize it Point to the corner, click and drag. I'm going to move the chart, select the columns. We use Control 1 to open up our task pane. And I want to change the gap width. I'm going to try 50 as the gap width and tab. Now I'd like to not have this axis, so I click Delete. Let's put the actual numbers because we want some detail in our visualization. So come up to the green plus, data labels, arrow, inside end. Now we will select the data labels, click once, home ribbon tab. I'm going to choose white font. And there we have our count of number of customer service encounters by day. Actually, this isn't by day. I clicked on the wrong cell. No problem. I click on the chart up in the formula bar, highlight the formula, equal sign, and this one is D4 and enter. There we go. We have the right hour, not day. Now, I actually want to use this exact chart, but over here for count by day. So very carefully, in the white area off to the side, right click. And there it is. We can save this formatted chart as a template. Now it's going to save it to a folder that will allow this chart to show up in our Insert Ribbon tab. I'm going to give it a smart name. I called it Chantel W Chart. Click Save. Now let's click inside our pivot table for count of customer by day. Insert, Chart. And we're going to use our dialog launcher. Click. Over here on the left, there's templates. And there it is, Chantel W Chart. Click. Click OK. Let's resize it. Uh-oh. It looks like the chart title is missing. But guess what? We connected this to a cell. That's a formula. The chart title is still there. And in fact, if you click the green plus, you can see it's there. So watch this. It's temporarily invisible, but it is there. Up in our context-sensitive ribbon, I want Format, Current Selection, and there's a drop-down with all the different elements in our chart. I want to select Chart Title. Oh, there it is. Now, equal sign, and I think this one gets cell A1 and Enter. Now, it looks like this label down here, if I select it, I can't see it. Notice when I select it once, it highlights them all. But if I click it a second time, I can format just this one label. Up to the Home Ribbon tab, font black. I can use my Move cursor to move it. Now, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 elements. We want to take these 4 elements and move them over to the dashboard. Now, the first element we want to move is topic of meeting, highlight, Control X. Over on the dashboard sheet, I've already created a label at the top, but I'm going to try and paste this one in E23, Control V, back over to Build, select the second pivot table, Control X. Over on the dashboard, let's see, H30, Control V, back over to the dashboard. I'm going to select both charts. Select the first one, hold Control, click on the second one, Control X, dashboard, somewhere up here, Control V. Click off to the side. I'm going to move this one, and we will try and fit our first bar chart. Now, there's a great trick when trying to either size or move charts. If I hold the Alt key, it jumps so that it lines up everything with columns and row. So holding Alt, I want it to be lined up with E and the bottom of 3. Now we can do the same thing for sizing. I hold Alt, click, and there we go. I've lined it up with G. I'm going to move this holding Alt, and I move it up right there. This one I'm going to select and size it again using Alt, because I actually want it lined up with between F and G. Very carefully down at the bottom, Alt and click, so it looks like it's lined up. Looks like that one label. I'm going to click once and twice. Change it to black, move it out. Now our next task is I want this label at the top to have the earliest and latest date from our data set. To do that, we're going to create a text formula up here. But we first need to extract from CS data the earliest and latest date. Well, we can use the min function. Come down to CS data, and we want to click on the sheet. This is the date column. I hover my cursor at the top, and when I see my black downward pointing arrow, I click. I can see up in the formula bar, it puts the table name and in square brackets the field name, close parentheses, and enter. We'll do the same for the MECS using the MECS function. Click on the sheet. At the top of the column, click, close parentheses, and enter. Now, when we add new dates to our data set, these dates will update. And I want the label at the top to also update. So select E2 and F2 to put it in edit mode. And we're going to convert this to a text formula. Equal sign, double quotes, and at the end, I'm going to type a space and then a double quote. And now I want to join this so that it'll say Chantel customer service encounters from, and we'll click on the begin date. Now let's just enter this and see what happens. And just as we studied in video number 1, dates and time use number formatting, and formulas cannot see that number formatting. So that's the underlined date and time value. No problem. F2, there's a special function that takes numbers, and for text formulas, it will add the specified number formatting. The name of the function is text. It takes a value, which is some number, comma, and then you have to give it the custom number formatting. Now, custom number formatting is complicated, except for date number formatting. So double quote, M/D/YY, and double quote. And that custom number formatting inside of our text formula will format that number. Close parentheses and enter. That is looking good. F2. Now we want to join using the join symbol, the word to in double quotes, and then we'll join it. And we'll use the text function again on the MECS date, comma, in double quotes, the custom number formatting, end double quote, close parentheses, and enter. And so this label becomes part of our dashboard. And when we add new records, it will totally update. Now, Chantel wanted the ability to print this out. If we do Control P to open up Print Preview, I can see that it's not all on one page. Down here, I can see page 1 of 2. So we need to do Page Setup. Up in Layout, Page Setup, we can use this dialog launcher, or we can use the keyboard, Alt-PSP. We want it portrait, and we want to fit it to 1 page wide by 1 page tall. Margins, we'll do horizontal. Header and footer. Down here is the preview of the footer. We don't have any footer. We could use the built-in drop-down, but we don't want to do that. We want to build our own custom footer. In the center region, I want to use the code for today's date. So I click on Insert Date. Every time we print this out, that code says put today's date. Space dash space. And I'm going to use the code that will always put the sheet name in. Click. That will be our footer. Click OK. On the Sheet tab, we want to define the print area very carefully from D1 all the way to K35. Now when we click OK and Control P to check Print Preview, that is looking awesome. Escape. Now the last thing is we want to test our solution. Go back over to CS Data, click in the Date column, Control down arrow. And when I scroll down a little bit, we're going to add new records. And we want to check to see if everything updates. Highlight, Control C. Below the Excel table, Control V. The new records are incorporated into the table. Now we come over to our dashboard. And up in Data, I want to click Refresh All. And just like that, everything is updated. We have a 3 on Saturday now. Wow, a much bigger meeting in office average. And Chantel is happy because now she can simply Control P and print out her new dashboard with her new useful information. Now, this is our finished Excel dashboard. And now we want to jump over to Power BI Desktop and see how to create the same dashboard. But check this out. All the tips and tricks and concepts that we learned about visualizing data in Excel apply over in Power BI Desktop also. Now, we talked a lot about this back in video 4. We love Excel because we're familiar with pivot tables. We're allowed to do anything off to the side in the spreadsheet, which you can't do over in Power BI Desktop. But what makes Power BI Desktop and Power BI Online so amazing is that we have interactive visualizations. We can click and filter based on Wednesday, and instantly we can analyze all the other visuals based on Wednesday. I can see 6 meetings at 2 p.m., 6 at 5. Want to look at Friday? Everything updates. Click again, and the power of the full message, unfiltered, is back. And of course, as we've seen throughout this class, we want both tools up our sleeve. We want to know how to do things in Excel and Power BI. Now, you want to make sure and save this file. And over on CS Data, this is an Excel table. We're going to open up a new Power BI desktop file and import this data. That way, Chantel can keep all her data in Excel because it's easy to keep the data there, and make her interactive visualizations over in Power BI. Now, whenever we build a solution, we want to check to see if when new data is added, everything works. This is the file, and here's Chantel's data set. I want to pull the table up, and I'm pulling it all the way up to exclude all of March's numbers. Now, when we import this table into Power BI, it won't include all of these records. Later, after we build our solution, we'll come pull this down to incorporate the new records into the table, and then refresh our Power BI solution to see if it works. Now I'm going to save this and close it. Now I opened up a new Power BI desktop file. I saved it here, and I have two sheets, both named with nothing in them. Now we want to go up to the Home ribbon tab, Data, Excel.Workbook to import our workbook. Here's the same folder we've been using the whole class, or that I have on the desktop. There's the file path. I'm going to click. That's what we want to try and look into and import that table. Click Open. Here it is, Chantel Washington Customer Service Table. I'm going to check this. There's our preview. We can even go down and see, oh, sure enough, it doesn't have March. Click Transform Data. That opens our table inside of Power Query, inside Power BI Desktop. We have a source from our on-premise file, navigation, change type. Now, we do need to transform this a little bit. We don't want date and time, so I'm going to select date, go up to the Transform tab, over to date and time, and I'm going to say I want to transform that column to date only. There we go, and it changed the data type. There's our new step. Rounded time is what we're going to use for our reports. We don't need this date. Transform over to time, time only. There's our new step. It got the data type. All the data types look OK. We're not going to need this column, so I'm going to select it, scroll over. Data types are looking OK. We don't need notes, so hold Control, click. And then we can remove both columns, right-click, remove columns. Now we're ready to load this. So we go up to Home, Close, we'll close Power Query, Apply, we'll load this to the only place that it can go, the data model. So I click. Now we're in Model View, and here's our fact table. Now this is a data model. So if we're going to make reports based on dates and times, we actually need a date dimension table and a time dimension table. Now we saw how to create date dimension tables in video number 4, but we didn't see how to create a time dimension table. So I will show you that. Let's go over to Data. As we saw back in video number 4, we create our date dimension table using calendar. We also are going to need day of week in our report. So we had to add weekday function here. Then we used format to show it as a day, and be sure to sort this using this feature right here. Sort this by day. That way, 1, which is Monday, will show up first in our report. Now let's create our time dimension table. Table Tools, New Table. We'll call this dTime equal, and as you remember from video 5, time values are values between 0 and 1. So we need to generate for every hour the decimal equivalent. Well, the way we're going to do that is we're going to create an hour ID 0 to 23. That way we can divide all those values by 24, and it will give us the serial number for each hour. There's a great function in DAX, generate series. Start value is 0, comma, end value is 23. When I hit Enter, there's the start to our time dimension table. Now I want to rename this, so I'm going to double click and call this hour ID and enter. Now we need to take all of these values and divide by 24. Column tools will add a new column. We'll call this serial number time equal D time. There's our hour ID divided by 24 and enter. That is looking beautiful, but we want to show these as hour values, 12 a.m., 1 a.m., and so on. New column. We'll call this time. And we use format. We've used format on dates, but here we're going to use it on time. DT. There's our serial number, comma. And in double quotes, we want HH space AM/PM and double quote close parentheses. That's the custom number formatting we learned in Excel, which works over here in the data model for format. And there are the time values. Now, if we use this in a report right now, since 1, 2 comes after 0, 1, it would not be sorted correctly. So just as we did with months in a date table, we have to sort this by either hour ID or serial number. Selecting time, column tools, sort by column. Either one will be fine. Hour ID, and now because 0 is 12 a.m., that's at the top. 1 a.m., that comes next. Now we need to come over to model and build our relationships. Here's time, here's date. We're going to take date and drag it over to our date. We get a one-to-many relationship. Exactly 1 day in the year, we can have many repeats over here. The serial number time is what we're going to drag over to rounded time. There's exactly 1 hour here. There can be many repeats over here. Now we'll come back here and hide the fields we don't need. But for the time being, we're going to go over to Data, our table view, and build our measures. We're going to select our fact table. Now we need to create a bunch of measures, most of which we learned about back in video 4. So I'll show you the easy ones, but then I want to show you 2 new ones. Average, we just took the average of the duration. Count meetings, we just counted all the records. Max date, which we're going to need for our report title, I just took the max of this. Min, same thing. Total meeting time, that's just the sum of duration. And total records, well, we need to remove the filter with all from the entire fact table inside of calculate and have that working on the measure count meetings. Now, if we remember back to Chantel's goals for this dashboard, one of the metrics we needed was counting of meeting type as a %. So this will be the denominator. We'll come up to new measure. I'm going to call this % meeting type equal divide. The numerator will be our measure, so we square bracket. Count meetings, comma. The denominator, another measure we already calculated. Total records. Close. Enter. And I want to add a percentage number format, 2 decimals. And the next measure that we want, I'm going to click New Measure, will be Report Title. And just as we did over in Excel when we created a dynamic title connected to the dates, we'll do that here. So in double quotes, Chantel. So Chantel, Washington Customer Service Meetings from. And over in Excel, we use text. But over here, of course, the equivalent function is format. We're going to format the min. And I see it right there. That's a measure, comma, and in double quotes, month/day/year. Close, and then we join it to, in double quotes, a 2. Another format. This will be the max. There it is. There's the measure. The same number formatting. And enter. So whatever new data we have here, this will be a dynamic label that will always show us the correct date. So now we have all of our measures. Before we create our reports, let's go back over to Model. We definitely want Customer because we're going to be dragging that attribute directly from the fact table. Date, hold Control, these columns here, and rounded time, right-click, hide in Report View. Over here, we don't want day. We might want date, but our reports don't really need it. I'll leave it there. We'll hide day, hour ID, and serial number. Right-click, hide. Now, if we go back over to Report View, I actually already tested our formulas like we did in video 4. This is a table. This is a card. I'm actually going to add another card here. There's our card. And check report title. And sure enough, that is looking good. Over here, I'm going to check the measure percent meeting type, and that is looking good. Now let's go over to where our dashboard will be created. Now we're going to create our visualizations here and create a dashboard. And there really are three main reasons why we use Power BI Desktop and publish it to Power BI Online over using Excel. The first is, as we'll see, creating the visuals is much easier. The second, of course, we already talked about. Visuals are interactive. Filter one, it filters another. And we can publish to Power BI Online to make it easy to share the results. All right, in our dashboard, we're definitely going to have a title and then two visuals that will give us a quick impression, and then two tables with specific data. I'm going to click somewhere in the white, Visualizations, and we'll start off with the title at the top. I'm going to click Card. Before we even resize it, we're just going to come over and click our awesome dynamic measure for report title. Now we can resize this. And when we move it around, that red line means it's lining it up in the center. And different than in Excel when we have to hold Alt to line everything up, here it happens automatically with those red lines. Now let's format this visual. Format. Call out value. We'll change the font. I think I'm going to change it to 25, or at least try that. That's looking good. We don't want report title, which is a category, so we come down here and say category label off. Let's go over to general. We want to add a background color. Effects, background. Here's color. You can choose whatever you want, or more colors. I chose a more color light blue. All right, now we want to create our visuals for counting meetings for week and hour. Now, don't leave this selected, because if we select one of these visuals, it will convert it. Let's click in the white. Now we want a bar, stacked, and clustered will give us the same thing because we have one variable. I'm going to click cluster. This one will be for day of the week, so I'm going to check day of the week. That's an attribute from the date table. And then from the fact table, we want count meeting, a measure, so check. And we can resize it. And already we can see how much easier it is over here in Power BI Desktop. We have an amazing title, and it got the labels for the axes correct. Now let's put data labels and remove these numbers down here. We want to come over to visualization, and here's format. So the x-axis, that's the numbers, we want that off. Data labels, we want on. And that's looking amazing. Now, it would be nice, instead of just count, if we had percent of total. But rather than having it somewhere directly inside this chart, Power BI visuals allow us over in Build something called Tooltips. That means we can drag a measure down here. The default tooltip shows whatever's already dragged to the chart. But we can drag other measures down to tooltips, and they show up in the chart tooltip. Now, we already have percent of meetings, but we want to learn something important. Let's click on percent meeting type. And what did I do here? I hard-coded a particular attribute here. But all this measure does is it just counts meetings as compared to the total. And because DAX measures see filter context, if I drag this formula anywhere, it just looks at whatever variable is sitting in the chart and gives me the percent of total. So I'm actually going to rename this and call it percent count and enter. Now let's try this. We're going to drag percent count down to tooltips. And when we hover, that is amazing. Now let's add also average. So now we have two different measures in our tooltips. I like to see an Excel chart do that. When I hover, bam, there it is. Now when we added measures to the tooltip, it did a bunch up here in the chart title. Now you may want to keep that, but I'm going to not keep it. I want to come over to Format. Over in General, we'll go to Title. And here it is right here. I'm going to very carefully select all the stuff in the middle and delete. So now we see count meetings by day of the week. Now that's a beautiful chart. we want to change one thing. Instead of day of the week, we want hour. So I'm going to click, copy, click off to the side, Control V, scoot it over. Look at those red lines. That's absolutely amazing. I'm not holding Alt like in Excel. Then uncheck day of the week. And actually, look at this. I don't want time. I should have called this hour. So let's go change that. Go back over to Data. Here's our time table. Up in the formula bar, this is the calculated column. I'm just going to rename it hour and enter. Now when I come back over to Report View, there it is. I can drag it. In fact, if I check it, it goes to the wrong place. It goes to Legend, but I'm going to drag it up to Y. And that is looking good, except for our title, Format, General, Title, and hour. All right, and we can move it. And now let's see something amazing. I want you to notice, over in Excel, we had to add white and black. We had to differentiate the data labels by color, doing it manually. But watch what happens over here. It's done automatically. That's another example of how the visuals over here are much easier to create. I filtered by Wednesday, and bam, Friday, just like that, it's filtered. Click again. I'm back to the complete analysis without any filters. Now, looking at this visual, it looks like we have chart junk. Day of the week count of meetings is repeated up here also. Same with this chart. So let's remove the X and Y labels. With the chart selected, we go over to Format, open up Y, all the way down to Title, and click Off. We can immediately, without changing this, select the other visual and turn that Y-axis title off. Now we come down to X, scroll down to Title, Off. We'll select this visual, turn that one off also. And those are looking much cleaner. Now we need to create two tables, one for topic of meetings and meeting type. So I select the Y, click Table, the attribute topic of meeting and count, click in the white, table, and we'll add the attribute meeting type, and we want %count. And notice this measure is being used on a different attribute and average. We can resize these, move them, and that's looking pretty good. The last thing we want to do is we can select any particular visual, go up to Format, Edit Interactions, and then for this visual, determine how the other visuals interact. Now I have this selected. I'm going to filter. Over here, we have it as highlight. If we select filter, then it only shows bars for items that appear on Wednesday. I don't think I like that. I'm going to do highlight. Down here for tables, you can either turn filter on, which it is by default, or turn it off. I think I'm going to leave the defaults for all of these. Unfilter. So here's our Power BI desktop dashboard. And as compared to Excel, it seems like these visuals are a lot easier to create. Of course, this amazing interactivity. Also, hover. We added metrics and measures to our tooltip. We can't do that over in Excel. And once we have a Power BI desktop file, of course, we can share it by publishing it to Power BI Online. Now, we studied Power BI Online back in video number 4, but we do want to publish this. And Chantel has already created a workspace where we publish this dashboard. I'm going to select. It's publishing. Now to jump over there, you can go to Power BI Online. Go to your Microsoft 365 Online portal, or we'll just click. And here's our dashboard published at Power BI Online. Now the key is we have a particular workspace. Here's Chantel. And if we open this workspace, we have a report, but we also have the data set. We can see those two items here. If we want to share all the items in the workspace, we go up to Access, find an email in our entity, and then in this case, Chantel probably only wants to allow people to view it. Once you add them to the workspace, they have access to everything. But what if we just want to share the dashboard? Well, we can open it, And of course, it's interactive over here, so we can analyze the data. But rather than share the whole workspace with all the items, we can come up to our More dots and pin to a dashboard. Now notice here's Chantel's workspace. We don't have any dashboards, but we say pin to dashboard. If we had dashboards, we could select one, but we don't have one. So we'll simply create one, pin live. And now we have a dashboard over here. We can select it. It is interactive. And if we want to share just this, we come up to share. We can add someone from our entity. Probably we don't want them to share or work on it. We just want to send them an email notification so they can view it. Grant access. And this is what the email looks like. We simply click Open this dashboard. Now think about this over in Excel. We did page setup and we're going to print it out. Or we could take the file and email it. But over here, we can send an email, open it up, and bam, there's our dashboard. Now this dashboard is currently in 3 places. We shared the dashboard. It's in the workspace under Reports. It's also over in Power BI Desktop where we created this. But where's the source data? If we go back over to the data source, let's add some records. So Chantel's been busy keeping notes. We want to save this, close. In Power BI Desktop, we'll take note. New accounts, there were 15. Home tab, queries, we'll click refresh. And just like that, we've updated. We also want to change something. And in Power BI Desktop, we can simply click at the top. And it sorts it from biggest to smallest. But now we've updated the data, changed some things. Control S. We want to publish. Same exact place. Click Select. We definitely want to replace everything. Replace. If we jump over to Power BI Online, look at that. It is all updated. Not only that, but that dashboard that we emailed and shared, it's going to update also. That's a lot easier than printing it out and giving it to someone or re-emailing a file when source data changes. So Power BI has some real advantages. Shareability, filtering and interaction, and the ease with which we can make visuals and dashboards. Also, not everyone belongs to an entity where we can share through Power BI Online. So a lot of people in the world use Power BI Desktop to get its great interactivity and the ease with which we can make visuals and dashboards. Then we just share our files the old-fashioned way. All right, now we're going to jump back over to Excel and talk about one of the most important tools in dashboarding, Power Query. Now the task at hand is to build product, sales rep, and monthly sales reports based on different stores. We want to easily be able to change the store and see the analysis change. Now, we're going to build 3 different dashboards, one with array formulas, one with a standard pivot table, and one in Power BI Desktop. But even though the end result dashboard is being built with different tools, all 3 of these tools require the same initial Power Query import and transformation. Now, back in MECS video number 4, we learned a lot of great Power Query tricks. But one thing I didn't show you is how do we get data from different Excel workbooks? Because here's the situation. We get data from each store, Oakland, Portland, San Francisco, Seattle, and Tacoma. And we may get other workbooks from different cities later. And what's different about importing multiple Excel files is within each Excel file, there can be many objects. Back when we imported multiple text files, there was only one table in each text file. For example, if I open Oakland, here's the one file. And within this Oakland file, there are objects such as the sheet. Each one of these sheets represents a sales rep. Also, Excel tables are considered objects. Defined names, that cell is named N, that's an object. Also, things like print area, filter, and advanced filter. Those are all objects inside this one Excel file. So when we import one file, let alone many Excel files, Power Query will make it easy to filter out the objects we don't want and keep only those sales rep sales tables. Another amazing thing about Power Query is, check this out, we have attributes as sheet names. I need Chantel in every single record in this table in a new column called Sales Rep. Not only that, but there's an important attribute in the file name. That's the city name. That also needs to be marked in a column called Store for every record. And in fact, that file name has to be in every record in all of these tables. Again, Power Query makes this so simple. All right, so let's close this and try this out. Page 33 in the PDF notes, here's all the Power Query steps we're going to do. And there's a couple screenshots of important formulas and features we're going to use. We're going to start off in our Excel file, selecting cell B3 on the sheet Array Dashboard. Data, get and transform, get data from file and from folder. There's the folder path. And when we point Power Query to this folder, it's going to try to import everything from that folder. Open. Transform data, not the other buttons. In the Power Query editor, I want to change the name. We'll call it something like Store Data. Now, the content column, if we click not on the word binary, but off to the side, there's an Access file. There's an Excel file. So this content column contains the files. Other fields contain file attributes. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to filter out to include only .xlsx. So I use the filter dropdown, uncheck everything, check .xlsx, and up in the formula bar, we can see the logical test. Extension must equal .xlsx. Next, we want to extract city name before the delimiter period. So I select transform, text column, extract, text before delimiter, period, click OK. Now, as we drill down into each one of these files and then drill down into the objects in each one of these files, this field will just keep expanding. So whatever's associated with this file will always have the attribute in every record, Oakland. Now we only need content and name. Holding Shift, click, right click, remove other columns. Now something that I want to do with all of these steps, I'm going to rename them so they're easy to read and understand. I'm going to select the second applied step and F2 to rename. Now I renamed each step to help us understand them. And importantly, I did not include any spaces because that'll make reading the M code later much easier. Now we need to get at the objects in each one of these files. Whatever you do, do not click that button. That button, notice it says Combine Files. That's only when you have tables with the exact same structure in each row. And we don't. We have multiple objects in each row. So instead, we have to use an amazing function called Excel.Workbook. And it can look inside of Excel files and pull out the objects. Add column, custom column. The new column name will be Get Excel Objects. Down here, our custom formula that will work in each row on each Excel file is called Excel.Workbook. Make sure and spell it right and have the correct case. Now, which one of these fields has the Excel file? Content, comma, and the second argument inside of Excel.Workbook allows us to promote headers. That is the first row to actual field names if we put true. False, and it won't do that. True has to be all lowercase. Close parentheses. So now when we finally get down to the objects we want, that first row in each table will be actual field names. Now we click OK. If we look at what this amazing function did, it creates a table. This column data has our tables or other related data. And then these other fields are attributes for that object. For example, the kind column tells us what kind of object it is. We can use this column to filter to get just the worksheets and exclude Excel tables and define names. Now here, we definitely want to expand because each Excel file has its own table with exactly the same field names. So I expand. I do not want to use the original column name. I just want to keep the field names. Click OK. And now this table lists all the objects from all the Excel files. Here's the objects for Oakland, Portland, San Francisco, and so on. And if we look in the data column, there's the sales table for the sales rep Shahara from the Shahara sheet in the Oakland Excel workbook. If we click down, here's some more worksheets. But uh-oh, someone left a default name, and it's not at all what we want. No problem, we can filter that out. Here, small table 2. If we look over in the kind, those were all sheets. That's an Excel table. All of these objects, filter, begin, criteria from advanced filter, these are all defined name objects. So we need to get the sales data from the worksheet objects where there's a sales rep name. To do that, we're going to start by filtering kind. We want only the sheet objects. Click the filter drop-down, uncheck select all, check sheet. This will remove Excel tables and define names. Click OK. Now we still need to deal with the fact that we have some default sheets. And default sheets always start with capital S sheet. So filter, text filters, does not begin with sheet. Click OK. And now we've accomplished our goal. In the data column, we have every single one of the tables we need to combine. Now there are other scenarios. Perhaps each sheet had a certain prefix. Then you could do one filter to include only that. Also, as we talked about earlier, if we use this to combine all the tables, every table must have the same structure and the same field names. Now, these came from lots of different Excel workbooks. Maybe there's a spelling error somewhere. We're going to assume for this example that date, product, and units are spelled correctly in each table. Now, although we're not going to do it in this video, when you download all the files, there's a folder called Test Inconsistent Field Names. And this all data file shows you how to extract tables when the field names may be spelled incorrectly. Now to combine, we definitely want the tables with the 3 columns. I'm going to select that first, then holding Control, click on Store, then Sales Rep. By selecting in a certain order, when I right-click, remove other columns, that field appears first, and as I want it, Store and Sales Rep next. Now we can finally expand. And this is amazing. All of the attributes in the other 2 fields, when I click OK, every single record is marked correctly. Oakland, Shahara. Oakland, Chantel. Portland, Sue, and so on. Now the field names, date, product, and units are fine. But let's rename. I'm going to double click and call this store. Enter. Double click and call this sales rep. Let's select sales rep. Hold shift. Click date. Go up to transform. And I'm going to use detect data types. It got them right. If it didn't, we would change them. Date, text, and whole number. Now the next thing we need to do is look up the price for each product. And that price table is in an Access file. So over here in Queries, I'm going to right-click, New Query, Database, Access. Inside our folder is Boom Prices. Click Import. The Navigator window allows us to look inside the database. There's only one object, so I'm going to select. Click OK. That name is fine. It got the data types fine. So now we go back over to Store Data. And to look something up, we use Merge Queries. Now Merge Queries, not Merge Queries as new, will look up the product price and bring it as a new column into the selected table. Now in the sales table, we select product. This is the lookup value that will allow us to go over to the Boom Price table. And from the first column, unique identifier product, get a match to go get the price. Join kind is left outer. All from the first, only matching products and prices from the second. Click OK. Now, this is a table because it brings the whole table over conveniently, because we can get 2 items at once. Uncheck Use Prefix, uncheck Select All, and we want to look up retail price and wholesale price simultaneously. This is what they got from the customer. This is what they paid for the item. Click OK, and we looked up 2 different prices, and it has the right data type. Now, we're going to do our calculations here in Power Query. So instead of loading this and then multiplying units and retail price to get revenue, we're going to do it right here in Power Query. And it's actually almost easier than Excel formulas. I select units, hold Control, click retail price, go up to add column, from number, standard, and it will build the formula for us using multiplication. So I click, there it is. It even got the data type I want. I definitely don't want multiplication. Rather than adding a new step, I go up. Notice that table.addColumn in the second argument before it did the calculation in each row and assigned a data type, that's the name. So I double click, revenue, and enter. We're going to do the same thing, wholesale, control units, multiply. This would be cost of goods sold, and enter. Now, we also want gross profit, which is revenue. I select that first, hold Control, cost of goods sold, up to standard, and subtract. Double click, and we'll call this gross profit, and enter. Now, we don't need retail price, wholesale price, and we're not going to use cost of goods sold for anything because all we want is revenue and gross profit. So we select those three columns. Right click, remove. All right, our query is complete. Here's all the steps. If we go up to Home, Advanced Editor, there's the M code. And as we learned in video number 4, by not putting spaces, our M code is much cleaner. All right, let's click Done. Now, we're going to load this to the Excel worksheet and then build a dashboard based on array formulas. Then from that same table, we'll build a standard pivot table dashboard. And then the amazing thing is we can import all of this Power Query M code, all these steps, directly into Power BI Desktop. So we only have to create this import and transformation one time. Now, we're going to load, but I forgot to remove the units field. Notice we already have this step down here. I can already see table.remove columns. But if I come up and right-click, remove, it updates our formula. Now we have just the fields we want. We're going to go up to Close and Load to. And for the time being, I'm going to load both tables as a connection only. Click OK. We can see they're loaded as connection only. Now I want to right-click Store Data, Load to as a table. And I actually want to put it in B4. Click OK. Now in the finished file, you can see the data, helper formulas that we use to create our dashboard. This entire dashboard is created with array formulas. Now actually, the next 3 dashboards, we already learned all the techniques to create them in video 4, 9, and 10. So I'm not going to go over building these dashboards. However, I am going to show you a few important dashboarding tricks. Now, the finished file has the complete solution, but you can try to build this dashboard in the start file. Now, I want to show you a couple things. And F2, we learned how to create single cell reporting formulas last video. But I want to show you conditional formatting. I started out by adding the background color, and then on top of the background color, we want to add conditional formatting. Now I'm going to highlight enough rows to accommodate any new sales reps. And now let's go up to conditional formatting, new rule. We're going to use the second option, and we want a logical test when there are no blanks, which really means not empty. Click Format. I'm going to use fill, this very light gray here, and border. Click OK. Click OK. And the beautiful thing about this trick is we have the blue background, but as soon as I select a city with fewer or more sales rep, bam, that is working. The next amazing thing I got to show you, and this is brand new. I'm filming this on January 11th, 2023. This is a dynamic array formula, and it used to be hard to get the data from this into a chart. We had to use defined names and all sorts of things. But Microsoft fixed this. So I'm going to select a single cell somewhere in the array, Insert, Charts. We'll go up to 2D bar, and I'll do a little bit of formatting, which we already learned. And now, without using defined names or any tricks, when I change the number of items in the array, the chart now updates. The other thing for this formula dashboard is this formula has everything, headers, inside report data, and a total row. So I don't want this total in the chart. So I'm going to use one of the great new dynamic array functions, drop. Click in the cell that has the formula, pound, comma, and I want to drop the bottom row, so -1. Now I have a helper formula connected to my single cell report, and I can use it to create my line chart. Now notice that I'm selecting anywhere in the array, not even in the top cell where the formula lives, and the charting engine will recognize it. Insert, and I'll get a line chart. And now based on the drop function input over here, we have our chart. If I come up and change the date range, bam! Both of these charts connected to dynamic spilled array formulas are working. Now let's go over to PQ Pivot Table Dashboard. Now these slicers, pivot tables, and pivot charts, we've created these a bunch throughout the class. But I do want to show you two tricks. The first is I created a single pivot table off to the side with a filter based on store. And I did that because I wanted to make a title at the top link to whatever's there. And then because this is a pivot table, right-click, Report Connections. I connected every one of the slicers, not only to the internal pivot tables, but also to this one over here. Click OK. That way, when I select Portland, bam, everything updates. One other thing before we jump over to Power BI Desktop. Of course, here we're using slicers to filter everything. When we're using array formulas, I use data validation drop-down list based on our unique lists created over here. Now, both the array formula and pivot table dashboard are based on this table Power Query output. But remember, up in our queries pane right here, those are separate Power Query queries that live in this Excel workbook. If we go over to Power BI Desktop, we'll use the feature that allows us to just import the queries. And then every single step will be imported into the Power BI Desktop file. Now I'm going to save this, close it, and open up a new Power BI Desktop file. Now I save the new file with this name. And to import something from Power Query directly, we go to File, Import. And with this option, as we saw earlier when we imported the data model, we can import something from Power Query. So I'll click, select your file that has the finished Power Query query, click Open. It's just reminding you that it's not importing all content, only things from Power Query and the data model. Click Start. And look at that, it got our two queries. Click Close. Now let's go up to Power Query, Home, Queries, Transform Data. And sure enough, there are all the steps. Now I want to load store data, but Boom Data, I want to come over and right-click. Now over here in Power BI Desktop, Enable Load is like load as a connection only. So for Boom Data, we do not want to check this. But for store data, we want to enable load. Now we can click Close and Apply to load this to the data model. And over in Data or Table View, there's our table. In Model View, here's our table. Now that we have the fact table, we create a date table and measures. Now here's the date table. I added a few measures. And we started our dashboard just as we did earlier in this video. But I do want to show you a few things. Now these are slicers. I have two of them. And instead of using a pivot table slicer or a cell with a drop down, of course, we use a Power BI slicer. Now we used to come up here to change the slicer settings, but now we go over to Format, Slicer Settings. And for this date, I want to set this as between. So now we get to choose Start and End and a slide bar. We can change this to August 3rd or use our drop down. August 31st. I want to change this one to tiles. So slicer settings, tile. And we are going to get some new data with new cities. And then I want to insert an image. And this image comes with the download, so I'm going to insert it. We can resize it. And the last thing we want to do, I want to add conditional formatting. And it's in a very different place than over in Excel. I want to conditionally format that DAX measure. So we come over to Build Visual and the drop down for the measure. And sure enough, there it is. I'm going to add data bars. You could change the color if you want. I'm going to click OK. And now we have all of the analysis for Oakland, Portland, and we can change the date. Now I'm going to save this. We have 3 different dashboards, and they're all connected to that folder. So let's go add a new Excel file from a different city. And we want to first go to our folder, take this file, San Jose. I'm going to copy it. We'll select our folder and Control V. And there's our folder path with a new Excel file. Now back in our Excel file, I'm going to go to Data and Refresh All. And sure enough, over here for data validation, I see San Jose. I can come over to San Jose. And in that file, there are sheet tabs with sales rep names. When I select San Jose, bam, there's the new sales rep. And for this dashboard, we can see the new data. Now, this standard pivot table dashboard is based off this Excel table Power Query output. So we actually have to go over to one of the pivot tables and right-click Refresh. And sure enough, now we have San Jose. Over here in our Power BI desktop file, I'm going to click Refresh. And look at that. Now we have San Jose over here too. All right, that was a pretty epic video. We looked at a dashboard in Power BI desktop, a dashboard created with standard pivot tables and array formulas, all created using Power Query to point to a particular folder. We saw how to create this Chantel dashboard in Excel, Power BI desktop, and Power BI online. And we started it off with all the basics and foundations of visualizing data. All right, if you like that video, be sure to click that thumbs up, leave a comment, and subscribe, because there's always lots more videos to come from Excel is Fun. All right, we'll see you next MECS video.